Welcome to Larry's Library. It's Top 10 Tuesday, and it's time for another Top 10. And this time, what I'm doing is my Top 10 comic book regrets. So, this might seem a little bit of a bummer, but sometimes you got to look back at the regrets to move forward. Maybe, I don't know. But I'm going to get right into it. At number 10, in my Top 10 comic book regrets, number 10 is not continuing to draw and develop as an artist. Yep, when I was a little kid, I drew all the time. I was constantly drawing. I was using comic books as reference. I was trying to copy the covers. I was trying to copy panels, all of that. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and I kept doing it on up through probably most of high school, and then I just kind of stopped. And I haven't drawn a whole lot since then, and I'm not really sure why. I guess maybe it was just too hard. The way it worked for me is as long as I had good reference, I could reproduce something pretty good. The problem became, wanting to be a comic book artist is you have to be able to draw something and then repeat that face or that look over and over and over and over. That's how it works. To do panel storytelling, you have to be able to do that. And that was really rough. It's really difficult. But so I sort of regret not trying harder and not continuing, because even if I never became an interior artist, I could have probably been a cover artist. There's a lot of artists working today and in the past that almost all they do is cover work, So, yeah, kind of regret that a little. My number 9 comic book regret is not getting Joe Quesada's autograph when I seen him at Wizard World Chicago in 2005. Yeah, I still regret that to this day. I had a couple of different opportunities at his official, table, but then also later I saw Joe Quesada and Brian Michael Bendis, and I think someone else, and I don't think I recognize that one, but one other comic book professional, I'm sure, or staffer. They were all there standing at the front of the hotel. What we eventually learned was that they were all waiting for a pizza that they had ordered. And they stood there for some time waiting for the pizza to come. And I was too scared to walk up there. I really wanted to. I thought, I shouldn't bother. But yeah, I just wish I had done it now, because I don't tend to go to conventions. I'm hoping maybe eventually I'll be able to, but I just never managed to make it there. And I really wish I'd gotten his autograph. So that's a bummer. My number 8 comic book regret is having ever left Comic Base. Comic Base is the comic book database software I use. I've done some videos on that. I'll put a link somewhere. You can check that out if you haven't already. I've done a couple videos on it, on the subject in general and Comic Base specifically. But I was with them many years ago, and I was a pretty heavy user and heavy contributor. I'm published within the software for a few blurbs I did. I did an ad for them once in a Comic Buyer's Guide. Picture of that if you want to see that. I really enjoyed the time I had there, and I left for a stupid reason and went to other software, and then eventually, recently, I've come back to Comic Base. But I regret ever having left, because I feel like it was all wasted times. It was wasted years, messing with the other database when I could have just stayed with Comic Base. Probably would have been in better with the whole experience. It's hard to explain, but it is a regret. So, yeah, moving on. Number 7, I regret not getting into omnibuses earlier when I first sort of discovered them. And the story there is, I believe it was 2010, pretty sure it was 2010, Amazon had this glitch sale. Now, it's become the stuff of legends now. I don't know how many of you know about the Amazon glitch sale of 2010, but they mismarked a bunch of Marvel omnibuses for crazy money, crazy low money, and I managed to snag one of them, and one of them was The Incredible Hulk Volume 1, which I got for, $14.99. Yeah. And I also picked up Hellboy Library Edition Volume 1 for $11.99 during that glitch sale. I still have the Hellboy Library right there, in fact. Yeah. And actually, this is volume 2. For some reason, they didn't have volume 1, or volume 1 was not marked at that price. But I did get volume 2 for $11.99 in 2010. So I did keep that. Oddly enough, I did not keep the Incredible Hulk volume 1 omnibus that I got for, $15. I started reading it. I opened it, started reading it, and I just found that it was too unwieldy. I think those were my exact words. This is awful. This thing is too heavy. It's too unwieldy. This is never going to work. And I believe Kristen, my daughter, the comic slayer, she was already into the buying omnibuses. And I think so. I think that might be true. That was 2010, though, so maybe she hadn't been. I'm sure she will correct me when she sees this video. But at any rate, I ended up, I just thought, this format is never going to fly. It's too big, it's too bulky, not for me. So I promptly put that on eBay, I believe, and sold it, which was a colossal mistake. It was an incredible mistake, you might say. Bad dad joke. But at any rate, that book eventually went on to become one of the whales of the omnibus community, such as it is. It went completely out of print. I since have managed to get a copy of that because Kristen gifted it to me one Christmas, her copy she had of volume 1. It was not my copy from the glitch sale, but you get what I mean. So, at any rate, I was exposed to omnibuses way back then, 2010. And if I would have embraced the format then, I could think of all of the whales I could have got for heavily discounted price, less than cover, and I wouldn't be waiting on reprints like I am now, I'm not sure what it took to get me to embrace the format. I'm sure Kristen will say it's her, and it was in large part to her influence for sure. And, I don't know. I love the format now. It's not my favorite. It's probably my second favorite format, first being the Marvel Gallery Edition. But it's up there, second or third favorite format for me. And what I found is that you just can't beat the economy of it. I mean, you have literally, in some cases, an entire collection in one massive volume. Yes, it is unwieldy and it's not really portable, but I don't need to go very far to read the book. Right here in my house, right here in the library. So, anyway, that's what happened there. My number 6 comic book regret is when I stopped reading and collecting comic books. At one point, and I'm not sure what year this was, but I decided that, comic books weren't for me anymore, and that I was too old for comic books, and I needed to move on, and I sold my original collection. But the regret here is that I stopped reading, because even if I had stopped collecting, I could have continued to read and either sell them, or I could have read in trade paperback. I mean, there's many ways I could have continued to read comics, and I wouldn't have this several year gap in my knowledge of comic books. I mean, I'm starting to fill a lot of that gap at this point, and I have, But I regret stopping cold like I did. It was a silly decision, and I totally regret that. Number 5 on my top 10 countdown of comic book regrets is not starting to read and collect X-Men when I was first exposed to them very early on. I can tell this story. Let's see. There was this girl down the street. I was a little kid. And when I looked up what this issue would be, it turns out it was Uncanny X-Men 132 with the Hellfire on the cover and featured throughout the story. And it surprised me when I looked this up because this was a 1980 issue. And I sort of remember being younger than 12, but this will put me at 12 years old. So this is probably right. I was already reading comic books and collecting comic books, but I was not yet really sold on the X-Men. I was not exposed to the X-Men too much until that moment that this girl down the street named Polly, never forget this, she come out of her house, and me and my buddy were there on our bikes. I don't know what we were doing, but she come out there and she had this Uncanny X-Men issue, and she let me look at it. And I'm flipping through there, and I don't think at that point I had ever seen John Bernhardt before, and I had never really read an X-Men comic. I mean, I was aware there was a team called the X-Men, but I didn't know a thing about them. And I remember really liking it and being intrigued by it. But I really still wasn't sold on it. I just sort of like, well, you know, um, this thing's on issue 132. This is my thinking at the time. I'd probably never be able to afford the other issues, and I like starting at the beginning. So, I was going after all these newer runs, which were easier to obtain at that time. I mean, this is long before collected editions were a thing. So I was just like, nah, it's too late for me to get X-Men. Not going to get that. So I went on. And boy, that was a dumb mistake. Because John Byrne was still on the title then. The Dream Team, I actually didn't get into the X-Men until John Byrne had left the title. And then I scrambled to try to get those back issues of the 10 or 12 issues before I started where John Byrne was on the book. And of course that cost a lot more and was a lot harder to obtain. So I regret not getting into it in 1980 when I first knew, it was exposed to it. Should have jumped on that then. But number 4 on my countdown is something that I don't talk about very much because I am deeply ashamed to have done this. And the friend in question here is Bill Wiest. And he watches some of my videos now. We're not really in contact much except online. But if and when he sees this, he's probably going to be shocked. And wow, he's not going to be happy probably because I still feel horrible about the whole thing. But my number 4 comic book regret is selling my Jack Kirby autograph. A friend of mine, the aforementioned Bill Wiest, he took one of my books. I had this, I can't remember the title of the thing. It was like the Jack Kirby Art Gallery Collector. I don't know. I forget what it was called, but it was magazine size. And it was a magazine about Kirby. Had a lot of Jack Kirby's art in it. And it had some articles about him in it. And it was one of my prized possessions. I really loved it for a long time. And I knew Bill was going to a convention, I think in New York. I believe that's where it was. And Kirby was going to be there. So this is, a long time ago. I believe I was in high school at the time, maybe. Yeah, it was high school. I didn't meet Bill till high school. And he agreed to take that with him and get it autographed for me because he was going to stand in line anyway. I'm like, great. So he took that book with him, sort of magazine size book, and he got Kirby's signature for me. And eventually got it back to me. And I loved it. And when I got rid of my original collection, I did not get rid of that. I kept some of my magazine size stuff for some reason. I guess I thought that was less comic booky. I don't know. Stupid. Yeah. and I kept that for a while. And then eventually when I realized I was done with comic books, or I thought I was at the time, I sold that book. I don't know, I might have got 50 or 60 bucks out of it, which was a lot more money at the time than 50 or 60 bucks is now, but it was still a colossal, incredibly stupid thing to do. And I regret that to this day, getting rid of my Kirby autograph, because there's no going back to that well. The legend is gone, And I feel bad for having gotten rid of the book because of the autograph and because Bill got it for me and because of what Kirby meant to me. And yeah, so I regret that deeply to this day. So, Bill, if you're watching this, sorry. Dumb young person mistakes, what that was. Number 3 in my comic book regrets countdown is not starting my YouTube channel years ago when I first conceived of it. Some of you might be a little shocked to learn that, some people who actually follow my channel might be shocked to learn that I considered and planned and even started buying equipment to do a YouTube channel 4, 5, maybe 6 different times in the past. Years past, I'm talking. And I would chicken out each time. I'm a pretty shy, introverted person, believe it or not. And this did not come easy to me to be able to record myself and put my face and my voice out there. It took me a long time to get over that. And I had a lot of false starts doing this channel. And I really regret not doing it years before I did. I've been at it a little over a year now. And if I had done it when I first started trying to do it, I'd be probably on year 4 or 5 by now. And probably a lot further along as far as the channel size and all that. So I really regret that. I feel like now comic book YouTube, especially in the collected edition community is, I mean, it's a niche inside of a niche anyway. So we're already niched down a couple levels. And so, where do I fit in that pile of creators? Well, I mean, I'm happy for all 799 subscribers I got, but I would be much further along had I started this when I first kind of had it in my head to do it. So that is a regret. Number 2 on my comic book regrets countdown is I wish I had tried a few more times to get Gene Colan's autograph at Wizard World Chicago 2005. I refer back to that convention a lot because it's really the only real comic book convention I've ever been to. And Gene Colan was scheduled to be there. He had a table set up. One of my favorite artists of all time. He was still alive at that point, obviously, and he had a table. And I went by that table probably 10, 12 times on 2 different days, and we never saw Gene Colan on the floor, at the table, nothing. There was no sign indicating, that he'd be back or any of that. He just wasn't there. Now, I've never looked it up to see, but I don't know if he even appeared at the convention. I'm assuming he did, but we just kept missing him. I don't know. And eventually we had to leave, and I had to give it up, and I never got Gene Colan's autograph. And I really, really regret that to this day. It sucks. I mean, maybe I should have just camped out there, Had I known this was going to be my only chance to get Gene Colan's autograph on one of my books, like I said, I regret not just camping out right there. Just stay there until the man showed up, but it didn't work out, and I never got that autograph, and that's a deep regret. But my number 1 comic book regret is selling my original comic collection. Now, I kind of alluded to this at number 6, stopping collecting comic books and reading comic books. So this is kind of dovetails into that, but this is the biggest regret I have because at that point when I decided that I was too old to read comic books and to collect comics anymore, I did sell the whole collection, and I sold it for a stupid song. Terrible amount. I'm not going to say how much. I'm not really sure I remember how much, but it was terrible. It was less, it probably averaged out to less than $1 a book. For sure it did. So it's not just the money, it's not really the money loss that causes me this regret though. I mean, there were a lot of gems in there. And I would say I probably had about 1,600 books I sold at that point, which was the most I'd ever had up to that point, which that seemed like a small number to me now and probably to a lot of my viewers. I mean, what I have left of my collection at this point in single form, I mean, I've probably got over 2,000 books right now that I'm planning on keeping, even though I have switched to collected editions primarily. And that's after having sold probably half of it to afford the collected editions. So yeah, this was a relatively small amount of books, but it was all the comics I had collected up to that point in my childhood and my teenage years and all that. And I had all the Godzillas, all the Shogun Warriors, all the Micronauts. Now I have since reobtained all those books, sometimes at great cost or great investment of time and research, and getting them all in decent shape, which is difficult, especially the Godzillas are expensive. If you Marvel's Godzilla run, they are pricey in the higher grades for sure. And there's probably a lot of things that I have not replaced that I've forgotten about that I had. Many, many great things. So I really, really regret selling my comic collection. It was just a dumb decision. So that is my top 10 comic book regrets. And I'm happy to say that I have rectified most of those. Certainly the comic book collection part of it I have. And that's all I got for this week. What are your comic book regrets? If you care to share any of your personal comic book regret tales, put them down in the comments and I'll check it out. It'll be interesting to see. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. Hit the bell to notify yourself. And I will see you next time.